Stanford University.
Welcome to Stanford Medicine's Contemplation by Design Summit. I'm Dr. Tia Rich, founder and director of Contemplation by Design. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce this next speaker, Rebecca Schisler. She'll be speaking to us about body, soul, and world, the holistic path of Jewish spirituality. Rebecca Schisler is a devoted mindfulness practitioner and Jewish educator. She is on the teaching faculty of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality and HaLev Center for Jewish Spirituality and Meditation, and has taught classes and retreats with Awakened Heart Project, Orot, Wilderness Torah, Pardes, and Mindful Life Project. She was previously the Director of Student Health and Wellbeing at Stanford University's Hillel and co-authored the Mahloket Matters Schools Curriculum with the Pardes Center for Jewish Educators. A student rabbi at ALEPH, Rebecca is passionate about integrating ancestral wisdom traditions with innovative approaches to personal and collective healing and liberation. She teaches Jewish spirituality as an embodied, transformational, and accessible path with relevant and timely wisdom for all. We warmly welcome you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Tia. And I just want to echo the warm welcome, welcoming all of you, that you are welcome here in your full humanity. And just to recognize that we're always showing up in our full humanity, right? So whether you're coming to your computer screen for the first time today, or if you've been online all day, just acknowledging that we're not just here in our heads and our eyes, but always bringing our bodies and our hearts and our souls with us in every moment. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So a warm welcome to you, however you are, whatever you're bringing with you. And I actually want to invite you now just to take a moment to connect with yourself on all of those levels. So if you want, you can even close your eyes and just take a moment to notice how you're doing. How's the body in this moment? How's the heart? What's your state of mind? Nothing right or wrong, no need to change anything, just inviting ourselves to be more fully present as we are. And we can all just take a breath. All right, so I'm very much looking forward to sharing with you on a topic that is extremely relevant to my life and has been transformational for me to delve into for many years now. I'm going to share my screen with you, so just one moment. So when Tia asked me to present on embodied contemplative practice within ancestral traditions for this year's summit, my first thought was one of appreciation. Appreciating how imperative it is that we really get in touch with our bodies, which is how we then can connect with the earth, which feels so important in this time of ecological crisis. And then I thought, and that's so perfect because that is what Jewish spirituality is all about. On the Jewish spiritual path, we understand and acknowledge that everything in our world, within and around us, exists in connection, in relationship to everything else. And also that all of it has an innate intelligence, is divinely designed in a way. Further, that actually all of it is divine. Everything is divine. The Jewish mystical tradition teaches that actually everything is God and nothing but God. In the Torah, you might know it as the Old Testament, but our Bible, the Torah, it says, Ein od milvado, which means there is nothing besides it, or there is nothing besides him. And the traditional reading of that is that there are no other gods but our one God. But the Jewish mystics actually look at that phrase and they said, no, what that means is there is nothing besides God, meaning that everything is God. And Jewish spirituality acknowledges that as human beings, we are capable of awakening to divinity on each of these levels within ourselves, in our relationships to others and to the planet. And we can learn to live in alignment with the rhythms and the cycles of our natural world and the greater ecology of all of our relations, thus allowing more divine inspiration and blessing and vitality to flow with greater ease into our material world, manifesting more well-being, more goodness, more peace. So today I want to present to you one framework that is helpful in understanding this holistic nature of Jewish spirituality and some of its distinguishing factors. This is a map that holds the body as foundational. And we'll also have some time to do some learning in Chavruta, which is like a study pair or a trio in a breakout room, as well as a guided contemplative practice towards the end of the session. And hopefully there will be some time as well for questions. The model I will present today is the 5 worlds model, which is an integral and holistic framework that exists on micro and macrocosmic levels, connecting our inner experience to our outer world. So the 5 worlds. The 5 worlds model is from our Kabbalistic tradition. Kabbalah literally means receiving, and this is probably the most well-known tradition of Jewish mysticism. These worlds are not separate worlds, but rather interdependent and interpenetrating dimensions of reality that are always present. So again, they're not separate worlds, but rather they represent like different stages of the manifest world as it is created out of what is called in the tradition Ein Sof, meaning without end or the infinite. So you can imagine this infinite space of the divine. And then as the world is created from that space, these are the stages of that world. Their order actually goes from the bottom up here. So starting with Asiya, the world of matter associated with earth. This is the most physical, least subtle ground of our being and the most far removed, so to speak, from that primordial infinite source energy. I want to also say that this map of the 5 worlds is actually more commonly taught as the 4 worlds rather than 5, because the 5th one right up at the top, Adam Kadmon, is so transcendent. So these 5 worlds or 4 worlds can be mapped as well onto the 4 seasons and the 4 elements, as you can see here. So I just want to go through this briefly with you, just to give you a sense of the concept, and don't worry at all about remembering the Hebrew. Starting with Asiya, the world of matter. Asiya represents earth, the objective world, the body and physical material reality. This is the world of action, where we encounter the laws of nature, cause and effect, and sensation. Moving from Asiya, we go into Yetzirah, represented by the water element. So this is the subjective world of feelings, the world of affect, of nuance, where we're aware from a feelings place of our interdependence on one another and the primacy of relationship. We can experience the full range of our emotions. Yetzirah moves into Bria, the world of creation, so symbolized by air. This is the symbolic world of the intellect, of contemplation, thought, finding patterns and meaning in reality, and seeking to understand. And then Bria moves into Atzilut, the world of emanations, represented by fire. So this is the holistic world of divine intuition and beingness with God, where all is one, divine union. This is the world of essence, where we can conceive of ourselves as being sparks of the divine. So we are not separate from God. And Adam Kadmon, not going to get into that one, but that's that primordial source, pure potential, sometimes called light without vessels. It's that from that infinite source from which everything emanates. So I want to share with you this piece from the Talmud, from the Babylonian Talmud, which is the central text of Rabbinic Judaism, the corpus of Jewish civil and ceremonial law and legend. And here the rabbis are describing the relationship between body, soul, the divine, and the world. So I'll just read it to you. From Brachot in the Talmud, Rav Shimi bar Ukva said to Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, I meant to say to you as follows, corresponding to whom did David say these 5 instances of bless the eternal, O my soul? And he answered him. He said that 5 times. He said them about none other than the Holy Blessed One, meaning God, and corresponding to the soul. Just as the Holy Blessed One fills the entire world, so too the soul fills the entire body. I want to read that line one more time. Just as the Holy Blessed One fills the entire world, so too the soul fills the entire body. Just as the Holy Blessed One sees but is not seen, so too does the soul see but is not seen. Just as the Holy Blessed One sustains the entire world, so too the soul sustains the entire body. Just as the Holy Blessed One is pure, so too is the soul pure. Just as the Holy Blessed One resides in a chamber within a chamber, so too the soul resides in a chamber within a chamber. Therefore, that which has these 5 characteristics, the soul, should come and praise the one who has these 5 characteristics. So just as the Holy One, meaning the divine, fills the entire world, so too the soul fills the entire body. The soul, in its home of the body, is in a way made to praise and be in relationship to the divine. So what they're saying here is basically that our soul inhabiting our body mirrors the divine as it inhabits the world. And in the way that they mirror one another and are similar, so they are actually made to be in relationship. Speaking to the way that these worlds that I just introduced to you actually exist within our own being on a microcosmic level. So just as there are 5 worlds, there are 5 corresponding levels of soul. And the fundamental principle here is that our cultivation of well-being and awakening on each of these levels, if we're pursuing well-being in our world, if we can cultivate that, which we seek to see in the world within ourselves, it will naturally impact the greater whole because we're in relationship and because we exist in this microcosmic way. And so if we want to impact the world in a beneficial way, it begins within. And a beautiful way, of course, to begin that process is to learn from these ancient traditions as to how those systems are designed. So a brief introduction to these 5 levels of soul. As you can see here, it's kind of the same image, just with this beautiful illustration of a person on top of it, illustrating that they're corresponding. So here, again, beginning from the ground up, we have nefesh, which is the embodied soul, associated with earth, associated with the body. From the Hebrew root nun, fe, shin, meaning to be refreshed, and associated with the world of Asiyah. Moving from nefesh, from the body, we move into ruach, which is the emotional soul. So associated with water, with the world of Yetzirah, and meaning wind or spirit in Hebrew. Moving from ruach, we come into neshama, the cognitive soul, related to Hebrew, the Hebrew word neshima, which means breath, actually, and associated with air and the world of bria. And then neshama moves to chaya, the spiritual or transpersonal soul, from the Hebrew word chayim, which means life, associated with fire and atzilut. And then moving up to yachida, primordial source, union with the divine, Adam Kadmon. So again, these moving from the top up, from nefesh to ruach to neshama to chaya to yechida, we're moving from the grossest, most physical, most obvious dimension of our experience to more and more subtle levels. And one important thing to note here is that, again, these levels of our being are not separate in any way, but interpenetrating and impacting one another actually in ways that we can perceive. So these are all different dimensions of our being. And we kind of take each one with us into the next. So the foundation of body then is included in the emotional, body and emotional included in the cognitive, and then spiritual. An easy way to remember this, again, don't feel intimidated by the Hebrew, is basically body, heart, mind, soul. We are holistic, multidimensional beings with a body, a heart, a mind, and a soul. And there is no hierarchy in this system, meaning none of these is actually more important than the other. They're all sacred and they're always present. So you might be familiar with the Star of David. It's a very prominent symbol of Judaism. Magen David in Hebrew, the shield of David. It's this six-pointed star. So in his book, God and Your Body, which I highly recommend to anyone who's interested in learning more about embodied dimensions of Jewish practice, J. Michelson writes, even the Kabbalah, the vast body of Jewish mystical and esoteric literature, understands the greatest spiritual achievement, not as transcending the body, but as joining body and spirit together. Symbolically, the Kabbalists imagined this six-pointed Jewish star as one triangle pointing upward towards heaven, transcendence, and that emptiness of the infinite, and another pointing downward towards the earth, towards immanence, and the endless varieties of experience. So the great goal of Kabbalah, which literally means receiving, is not to privilege one triangle over the other, to flee the material world in favor of the spiritual one, or vice versa, but it is the sacred marriage of the two. So this is one way of understanding the goal of Jewish spiritual practice, is this integrated way of being. And so I want to delve with you a little deeper into this dimension of our soul, nefesh, that is associated with physicality, and to learn more about some essential ideas in Jewish tradition regarding what it means to have a body. And to do so, we're going to visit some text from Genesis, the first book in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, called Breshit in Hebrew, which is our creation myth. So here are our texts from Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 2:7. And I really love, especially for folks who, well, anyone with any kind of relationship to the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, or the Old Testament, so much can be gained from actually looking at it in the original Hebrew. And so the translations that I've put here in the English are really looking quite literally at the words of the original Hebrew in an effort to draw out as close of a translation as possible. So I'm going to just read both of these sources aloud to you, and then we're actually going to go into breakout rooms for 5 to 7 minutes to discuss these texts amongst yourself. So the first text, it says, Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo, and God created the human being in God's image. B'tselem Elohim bara'oto, in the image of God, He created it. Zachar v'nekeva bara'otam, male and female, God created them. So that's the first text. And then the second text, it reads, Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et ha'adam, afer min ha'adama. The great loving spirit, this four-letter name for God, formed Adam, the earthling, from the soil of the earth, from Adamah. Vayifach be'afiv nishmat chayim, blowing into their nostrils the breath or spirit of life. Vayahi ha'adam lenefesh haya, thus the earthling became a living being, a nefesh chaya. So in just a moment, you'll be invited to join a breakout room with a couple other people. And I'll drop these texts in the chat as well so you can have them. And my question for you as you read this text together is, what can we learn from these texts from this first chapter in the Bible about how the Jewish tradition conceives of the body? So what is the body? What is its essence? And I'll just drop both of these texts in the chat. And then you can go ahead and join your breakout room when you receive your invitation. All right, so folks are coming back. We'll just wait for a few more moments for people to rejoin us. And I'd love to hear a little bit if anybody has anything that you would like to share that you discussed amongst yourselves from these texts, from maybe starting with Genesis 1:27. God created humankind in the divine image, creating it in the image of God, creating them male and female. Would anybody like to share any sparks, any insight or reflections that came up for you in your discussion? The divinity of the body was apparent. I absolutely want to lift that up. So, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, this is a fundamental idea in the Jewish tradition in regards to what it means to be a human being, that we are created in the image of God in this divine design, emphasizing that the body has its own innate intelligence and that we can actually learn to trust its wisdom. So there's a midrash, which is like a rabbinical interpretive story about our ancestor Abraham, that the Torah is about him. So he obviously didn't study Torah. And there's this midrash, this story that the way that Abraham learned Torah and learned wisdom was actually through his kidneys at night, that he learned all of his wisdom through his kidneys by night. So there's a lot that you could go into there and try to understand what that means. But the basic idea is that our bodies are Torah. Our bodies have this innate intelligence and wisdom, if we can learn to speak their languages. And also, as Donna said, that the body is innately sacred. If the body is made in the image of the Creator, it is worthy of our respect and our care. And furthermore, that all bodies are sacred. Our tradition actually teaches that the body is on loan to us, that the body is given to us as a gift, and we are charged with caring for it throughout our lives, but that at the end of our lives, it is returned to our Creator to whom it belongs. So the body is sacred and must be treated as such. Thank you for these comments. Angela says, I love the direct simplicity and elegance of our beingness. Beautiful. So moving to the second text, to Genesis 2:7. If anyone has any thoughts or reflections that you'd like to share on this text, please share them in the chat. Just read it one more time. It says, great loving spirit formed the earthling Adam from the soil of the earth Adama, blowing into their nostrils the breath or spirit of life, nishmat chayim. Then the earthling became a living being, nefesh chaya. And I want to lift up a few important points from this text. One, Adam. So the name Adam or Adam in English, Adam in Hebrew, is commonly translated as the name of the first man, right? And associated with that male figure in that book of Genesis. But actually what you see here is that the proper translation for Adam is actually not man, it's earthling, coming from the Hebrew word Adamah, and thus suggesting this intrinsic and essential relationship between this human being, or what it means to be a human being, and our earth, that we are in a sense living tendrils of the earth itself. And we can learn so much about ourselves from getting to know the earth and existing in relationship to her rhythms and cycles. And we also learn from this text in that God breathes in the breath of life, nishmat chayim, thus bringing life into the nefesh. So that the earthling becomes a living being, a living body, that there's an intrinsic relationship between breath, spirit, and body. So in contrast to Cartesian ways of thinking, according to Judaism, the body and soul are always in connection. They're never separate. And the body is actually another dimension of the soul. We can also notice that nishmat chayim, the breath of life, that word nishmat shares the same root. So in a way is the same word actually as neshama, which was that cognitive dimension of the soul, suggesting that there's a connection between the breath and the soul. In a way, you could see it as the breath being that mysterious thing that kind of unites all of those dimensions of our being. And that this is something given as a gift from the divine, right? We don't have to actively breathe. We, in a sense, are breathed. And according to this story, it is something that is given to us, something that we receive. Through the giving of this breath or this spirit, the neshima, this nefesh, the body, becomes a nefesh chaya, a living soul, a living being. Nefesh chaya. What does it mean to be a living soul? So I want to emphasize again that although our body, according to this map of the 4 or the 5 worlds or levels of the soul, although the body is the densest part of the soul, it is also the foundation of all other levels of our being and integral with life itself. Virtually any Jewish law can be overridden for the single most important commandment, which is that of saving life, called pekuach nefesh, to save a nefesh. And understanding the centrality and the foundation of our body, we can also understand that the body, on the contrary to being separate from our spirituality, it actually becomes the practical place for our spiritual work. And we find that the core instructions or enjoinments on the Jewish path, called mitzvot, are generally body-centric physical acts. There are so many examples of this. Here are some photos that just illustrate some of the variety of Jewish practices that are body-centric and earth-centric. And I want to just share with you a few of these core practices and ways of relating to our embodied and earthly nature that I believe are highly beneficial and can be utilized by any person on any path that you might be on. So the first kind of core embodied practice or experience is around food. And if you have had any experience with Jewish people or Judaism, you know that it's really all about food. And the act of eating in Judaism has more customs and laws and traditions around it than almost anything else. For one, you might have heard of the system of keeping kosher, called kashrut as a noun. So there are many ways to keep kosher on a wide spectrum of observance. But the basic principle in keeping kosher is basically affirming that what we eat matters and has impact, not only on our own bodies, but on the animals whose bodies we might be eating and on the planet. And that it's beneficial to have an intentional standard that we hold ourselves to so that we are bringing more intentionality and consciousness into the practice of taking nourishment and taking food into our bodies. Along with kashrut, one of the primary practices that we have around food in the Jewish tradition is the practice of blessing our food. So if you've ever been at a Shabbat meal, you may have noticed that there are a number of blessings that Jewish people say over wine, over candles, over the bread, over the meal before eating. And there's actually a teaching in the Jewish tradition that if we don't bless our food before eating it, it's as if we've stolen it. So really highlighting the importance of taking this moment before eating to pause. It's really a moment of mindfulness, actually. A moment to pause before eating, to acknowledge the source of life, to acknowledge that I didn't grow this food, right? It didn't come out of me, but that this food came from this greater whole, to connect to that sense of gratitude, to give thanks, and to connect to our intentionality for nourishment and for enjoyment as we eat. So here on this slide are just some examples of the blessings that you might hear before enjoying food. And then I want to share a little bit about the Hebrew calendar. So also, if you are Jewish, or if you are in connection to Jewish people, you might have noticed that it seems like there's basically always a Jewish holiday right around the corner. It certainly feels that way right now in this time of the year, which is a season known as the high holidays, where we have like 4 or 5 back-to-back holidays, and they're big deal holidays. And that's because the Jewish tradition is mapped onto a calendrical cycle. I love this quote from Simon Jacobson. It says, "The Hebrew calendar is not a highway that progresses from past to future in a linear fashion, as does the Western calendar familiar to all. Rather, it is a spiral staircase that winds around, cycling the events of history and drawing their energy ever upwards." So you can see here on this beautiful image, the way that this calendar moves in a cycle through the seasons of the year. And each one of these festivals is associated on some level with what is happening actually seasonally in our planetary cycle, often in our agricultural cycle. And through observing the different spiritual and emotional and physical and intellectual themes of these holidays, this is where so much integration of our minds and bodies and hearts and spirits takes place in community and in communion with the natural world. So what I love about the way that Jewish spirituality is always connected to time is that it's really dynamic, inclusive of the full spectrum of our human experience. There are holidays for celebration, there are holidays for grief and acknowledging insurmountable loss and suffering and everything in between. And these cycles exist on every level. There are daily cycles and practices, weekly rituals, yearly rituals and cycles, and beyond. As an example, right now in this moment in our calendar, you can see here on the image, it says here on the right, Sukkot, and some of the themes of Sukkot include joy and dwelling in nature. So this is our harvest festival, actually, that takes place during the fall. And it's a time that we spend extra time outside. We build temporary structures that support us in encountering the raw elements of nature more directly, and actually cultivating joy, even as we're praying for rain for the coming year and praying on a more symbolic level for whatever it is that we need for our sustenance and survival. And so each one of these holidays, again, has a myriad of ways in which we can connect on every level, providing dynamism and inspiration to our spiritual practice, and helping us to connect to the greater whole, helping us to connect to the planet and connect to other human beings sharing in these seasonal cycles. One of our most primary, maybe even the most important ways that we connect that Jewish people connect to the rhythms of the cycle actually takes place on a weekly basis. It's personally one of my most core spiritual practices, and it's the practice of Shabbat, the Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath. So this is an image of Shabbat candlesticks, and here's just a verse from the Torah instructing the Jewish people to keep the Sabbath. And I'm just going to read the last part of it. It says, "For in 6 days God made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed." Shavat vayinafash in Hebrew. Shavat, related to the word Shabbat, literally means to stop, cease from your work, pause. Vayinafash, to be refreshed. So you might recognize that this word contains the same root as nefesh, vayinafash, nefesh. And actually a more correct translation, rather than refreshed, would be to be re-ensouled. It's like that nefesh aspect of your soul, your physical soul on Shabbat is meant to be renewed and refreshed through that ceasing from work. You might recall the piece we read earlier from the Talmud comparing our soul and our body to the way that God exists in the world. And so in a way, what we're doing on Shabbat is we're mirroring the activity of God according to our story. So just in the way that God worked for 7 days and then ceased and was refreshed, so too we take that as some wisdom as how we can be in relationship with the divine and with our lives through working for 6 days and then ceasing from our work and refreshing our physical souls. There are a number of ways that we do that on Shabbat. There's a lot of emphasis on the importance of resting, as well as menucha, as well as oneg, which is like delighting, engaging in sensorial pleasures, being in community, praying, singing, studying Torah as well. So again, just engaging our beings on all these different levels. And I think one really key principle to understand about what is so important about Shabbat is this sense that in order to create what is called Olam Haba in the Jewish tradition, meaning the world that is coming, this more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, in the words of Charles Eisenstein, if we are really aiming to create a better world, in order to do that, we actually need to experience that world and embody it on a regular basis so that we know how it feels. Otherwise, we might forget, right, what it is that we're even working for. And if we can do that on a regular basis, that embodied experience of presence, of delight, of rest and togetherness will then refresh and inspire us and even inform the work that we do when we go back into our work week. And I want to acknowledge that in our extremely fast-paced world, especially if you're a student at Stanford University, I know what it's like there, that is absolutely not easy, right? To take some time on a regular basis to cease, to pause, to become present, and allow ourselves to relax and enjoy. And so our tradition teaches that we really need to remember this statute, and we even need to guard it, to protect it, because it's so vital to our well-being. And the two candles that you see here in this photo actually represent those two instructions to both remember and protect the Sabbath, Shamor v'Zachor. So those are just some examples of some core embodiment practices within the Jewish tradition. Now, I want to circle back and return to the 4 worlds or the 4 levels of soul. Again, don't worry about the Hebrew. The basic concept is body, mind, heart, and soul. We are holistic beings with these interpenetrating dimensions of our being, and they correspond to the same kind of dimension in the world. And as I mentioned, one of the goals of Jewish spiritual practice is really to awaken to the sanctity, to the divinity that is infusing each of these levels at all times. In the Hasidic tradition, this is called dvekut, which means closeness to God. And dvekut is basically the ability to remember God's presence and to sense the presence of God in all moments throughout the highs and lows and ups and downs of life. And I want to share with you a teaching and a practice today from Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi of blessed memory. He was an extraordinary rabbi and teacher to many, and the founder of the Jewish Renewal movement. And he taught a way of having this dvekut, of feeling this closeness to God, and in a sense, really awakening, aligning with the divine presence on each of these 4 levels of our being. So body, heart, mind, and soul. The basic teaching is that it's quite easy to be asleep on all of these levels. That might mean in the body, we are not listening to the body, or we're in a habit of judging our bodies or trying to control our bodies. On the heart, it might mean that our heart is closed off, or we're holding on to hard feelings or resisting feelings that we don't want to feel. On the level of mind, that might mean that we're kind of constantly lost in thought or distracted, or in our judgments and interpretations without really acknowledging them as such. On the level of spirit, we could be totally zoned out, totally in our forgetting that life is sacred. And in the same way that we can be asleep, he taught we can also be awake. And the tradition teaches we can also be awake on each of these dimensions. And so this teaching presents a very simple way of considering and experiencing what it might mean to be awake and to be in the presence of the divine on each of these levels of our being. So on the level of body, the invitation or the teaching is, it is perfect. So rather than constantly trying to control and judging the body for being not enough, the invitation is to consider actually that the body and the material realm actually is perfect just the way it is. It's divinely designed, it's intelligent. We can learn to trust it. We can relax into it and listen to it. On the level of heart, the invitation here is you are loved. So it's possible in any given moment to tap into what the Jewish tradition teaches as this unending, like incomprehensibly vast love with which we are loved, literally loved into being at all moments. So we can open and soften our hearts to sense the love that is here, and to also receive love, and to get to give love as we receive it as well. On the level of mind, the teaching is all is clear. So when we can create enough space to actually unhook our attention from the constant stream of thoughts and stories and interpretations and judgments that are constantly arising in our mind, when we can create some spaciousness, we can actually relax into the natural radiance of awareness itself and allow that thinking process to happen without identifying to it. And then we might find that actually there's a lot of clarity here as to what is real, what is happening, and what we need to do moment by moment. And then on the level of spirit, the invitation is, I am holy. So when the body is present, when the heart is soft and open and included, when the mind and the attention is also focused in the present moment, when we're more fully and holistically here, then we can listen deeper to perceive the sacredness that pervades being. And so I want to just offer about a 10-minute guided meditation on this teaching on dvekut in each of these realms. And so I want to just invite you to relax, go ahead and relax into your body. close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or you can gently focus your gaze on nothing in particular, maybe away from the screen. And allow your sense of embodied presence in this moment to fill your attention. So just inviting ourselves to more fully arrive into this present moment. Whatever is here. And beginning with the body. Just feeling the body from the inside out. Noticing any sensations in the body. No need to make anything right or wrong, or good or bad. There might be pleasant sensation or unpleasant or neutral sensation. Just noticing what is here. Perhaps a warmth or a tingling, some tightness. Perhaps noticing sound, maybe the sound of my voice or some sound in your environment. And contemplating the possibility that it is perfect. It is perfect, this body just as it is. Just the way it is right now. Relaxing into the body. Nothing to fix or control. Allowing it to be just as it is. It is perfect. And from this foundation of embodied awareness, becoming aware of any emotional tone or experience that might be present right now. How's your heart in this moment? Again, there's no right or wrong. Just opening and softening to whatever is true right now. Opening to the gentle invitation of you are loved. You are loved. Just noticing how those words land in the heart. Is there some sense of love present in this moment? You are loved. And now bringing your attention to your state of mind. How's the weather in the sky? What thoughts are present? No need to get hooked into them. Can just observe as thinking is happening all on its own. Allowing thoughts to arise and pass away. Nothing to fix or control. And just relaxing into awareness, which is naturally already present. The clarity of natural mind, aware of this experience as it unfolds, moment by moment. All is clear. All is clear. And can we listen deeper? Can we feel, can we know the mystery, sacredness, that sense of unknown that is present? Even now. I am holy. It is perfect. You are loved. All is clear. I am holy. And just noticing with kindness whatever is true, whatever is present in your body, your heart, your mind, or your spirit. You can gently open your eyes, notice where you are. I want to thank you all so very much for your kind attention and the opportunity to spend some time with you today. I want to share some resources for continued exploration if you're interested in learning more about these integral and holistic approaches to Jewish spirituality. I'm on the core faculty of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality as well as HaLev, and we offer many retreats and classes and workshops in person and online. And these are some other really wonderful organizations out there that you can look into. And so we have about 8 minutes now. If there are any questions that anybody would like to ask, or even any reflections, you are more than welcome.
I'll share a question that arose in the breakout room, and that has to do with the Kabbalah tradition's teachings about movement practices and breath-based movement practices, whether there are any documents or texts that offer that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Movement practices and breath-based practices.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a variety of different kinds of movement practices and many different embodied practices that by their nature involve movement. One example is right now in this holiday of Sukkot, we have a tradition of shaking what's called a lulav, which is 3 plant species tied together, holding it with an etrog, which is looks like a big lemon, and shaking it in all 6 directions as part of our prayers for rain. So there's an example of a practice that is by its nature movement oriented. There are also within Jewish prayer practices and traditions, there are different postures, including standing postures and seated postures and prostration as well, that correspond to different prayers and moments of prayer that are very important. And then I'll also say dancing. There are practices of dancing that are customary and traditional in many different Jewish cultures, and also some customs of dancing that are directly tied to many of our really important prayer moments throughout the cycle. Again, a great example of that is right now on Sukkot, we actually do this huge rain dance, basically. It's a circle dance, and Kabbalistically, the Kabbalah talks about how that is meant to like unite heaven and earth and shift our consciousness in all these ways and draw down lights, and it gets like a little esoteric. But dancing is a huge one, and also the practice of singing wordless melodies, kind of in a chanting style, just continuously until the sense of self dissolves and the experience is fully immersive. Those are some examples. Kabbalah has a lot of kinds of meditations that are quite focused on like visualization and working with the mysticism of Hebrew letters. I don't know of any right now off the top of my head that are associated with breath specifically, although there is a native Jewish tradition of mindfulness and a very emergent world integrating mindfulness practice with Jewish tradition, which is the world that I'm very active in those different organizations. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I hope others who were in the breakout will step forward if you have further questions, but that was a rich response. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true that Judaism and the Torah is the roots of Christianity, and that Jesus was a Jew, he was a rabbi. And of course, and Christianity also took those teachings then and brought them in very different directions. So I'd say to say, sometimes there's an idea that, well, Christianity is kind of like the new Judaism or the more evolved version, as in like this is the New Testament and that was the Old Testament. And from the Jewish perspective, that's not what we believe at all. To us, the Torah is not the Old Testament, it's the Torah, it's our Bible. But it is true that Judaism is at the roots there, absolutely. And so I really enjoy, actually, I'm doing a lot right now studying Judaism and studying our sacred texts actually with non-Jewish folks and some Christian peers that I have right now as well, because I think there's a lot to be discovered in the Jewish perspective on these texts and the roots of these traditions that um, that we have retained as our primary tradition. So yeah, I think it's certainly the oldest of the Abrahamic faiths. And I don't know nearly enough or as much about Islam or Christianity, of course, as I do about Judaism, but there are both striking similarities among the traditions as well as extremely important differences. And it sounds like it could be a really rich and beautiful journey to explore a little bit more about what those roots might be. So again, on the resource page here, recommended some great organizations to check out to begin that journey of Jewish learning. So, yeah.
Well, at this place of invitation to explore, we thank you very much for your rich exploration and illumination of the body, spirit, and world from a holistic Jewish tradition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.